Hello. I keep forgetting that if I ever feel old, all I need to do is shave, and then I won't feel old anymore because I look like a tiny Mormon boy. Um, so I told you guys two lies last week, and for that I am deeply repentant. I said that I was going to have facial hair, and I said that I was going to play Silk Song. First one I thought was true at the time. I mean, well, I thought both of them were true at the time. Um, First one, I couldn't see coming that production was going to ask me to shave, even though I was standing in on it. Really don't understand why that was necessary, but I needed the money. And then, as for Silk Song, I should have remembered that today is the last Sunday of the month. I should have remembered that this was going to be a strawberry stream, and I didn't. So, um, I hope that in time you can forgive me and I can re-earn your trust. Until then, let's play Wordle. Oh, I'm not playing music. I should play music. Boom. Books. Because we're gonna read. Oh, wow! Look, Mom! But. Can't believe I got a double O in my first guess. Wow. Okay, what do we do with this? Could be loony. Could be poopy? Is that a real word? Poopy? Poopy. Well, now I feel like a child even more. Roomy. Fuck. Such a strong start, and I'm gonna need 6 guesses, aren't I? Woozy? Goofy. Please? Gooey. I've been bested! I've never lost Wordle on stream before that I can think of right at this moment. I probably have. I almost certainly have. You enjoying the music? Let's read a book. Boom! Drink some water first. Wet my whistle. Where did that saying come from? Wet your whistle. I guess because, like... I guess the vocal cords are the whistle in this scenario? I don't know. Bum 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 ba da dum ba. That was pitchy, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna figure out where it is that we stopped. Ba da ba da ba 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 da 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 da. I don't remember where we were. We definitely started of facts and truths, but I don't remember if we finished it. We very well may have, but then again, maybe not. I should do this before stream, shouldn't I? Okay, I do think we finished Facts and Truths. So, today we're starting with the Big Three. Oh. Alrighty then. I'm not sure who it is playing. It might be Keigo Hawashi. But either way, you go. I'm pretty sure the artist credit just says Keiichi Okabe. But I don't think he records piano? I don't know. Another drink of water, and then I'll stop procrastinating. I mean, not in life, but in terms of reading the book. What is that? Hey. The Big Three. My hair is falling on my face again. I need to get a haircut so bad, but I also might need to do another 70s shoot this coming month. And, I just want a haircut, man. But not on my face! The Big Three. Buddhism has lots of numbered lists, like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Three Virtues, and the Five Hindrances. The Big Three is not one of these. This is my Big Three, my short list of the most useful Buddhist concepts. The core of what this book is meant to convey can be rendered in terms of just three related concepts. Buddhist teachers of all stripes exhort us to displace each of these things below on the left with the corresponding thing on the right. Wait, let me read that again. Buddhist teachers of all stripes exhort us to displace each of the things below on the left with the corresponding thing on the right. Attachment, displaced with non-attachment. Illusion or delusion, displaced with what is so. And permanence, displaced with impermanence. Attachment. For our present purposes, consider just the following two things, side by side. Even the healthiest attachments compete for our time and attention, and with the immense work of achieving clarity and equanimity. Achieving clarity and equanimity is more than a lifetime of work, even if one has no large-scale competing interests. Even so, the Buddha gave marriage advice, and the Dalai Lama recommends love, marriage, happiness, pleasure, and striving, all of which are forms of attachment. The Dalai Lama speaks frequently in favor of love and compassion with evident joy. He laments that too many people in the West have given up on marriage. He delights in his interactions with children. He speaks often on behalf of justice with kindness and kindness. Each of these reflects attachment to values and striving to live up to them and spread them as completely and joyously as we can. He has said the idea that Buddhism is against attachment is nonsense, noting that no one would ever achieve enlightenment, the Buddhist purpose of life, without desiring it and striving for it. Consequently, I must say that when Buddhists speak of the importance of non-attachment, this is a poor word choice. They are not telling us not to love people or causes, or not to enjoy pleasure, things, or status. They are telling us how to love and enjoy. Despite some of the sound bites we hear, Buddhism does not ban attachment. Rather, it warns us vigorously against misdirected attachment, and against attachment that slips into identification. Misdirected attachments are those that are poorly aligned with one's values, pragmatic objectives, or personal development. Attachment slips into identification when we think a change in circumstances changes the answer to the question, who am I? We often consciously or unconsciously think that our possessions, job, relationships, and status, as well as our problems, define who we are. and show the measure of who we are. This is an over-attachment to circumstances, turning them into aspects of identity. The true relationship between our circumstances and who we are is much more tenuous than we routinely recognize. When we learn that we have made a mistake, when we accomplish something new, or when something outside of us changes, we might elect to make, or we might be forced to make, an adjustment in our relationships, goals, ownership of things, or our status. That doesn't make us not us. When we acquire or resolve a problem, that doesn't make us not us. We are not our circumstances. We continue being the same us, in new circumstances. Quote, "Detachment is not that you own nothing. Detachment means that nothing owns you." Sujata. Quote, "Receive wealth or prosperity without arrogance, and be ready to let it go." Marcus Aurelius. Who you were at age 5 and who you are now are parts of a continuous whole, despite your age, physical body, education, experience, etc. all being different. Similarly, there is a continuity between who you are before and after getting or losing a job, getting married or divorced, the death of a loved one or the birth of a child, a tragic accident or a malicious attack, making or losing a lot of money, satisfaction with an important personal accomplishment, achieving contentment with things just as they already are. Oh, that's the end of the list. When we are too attached to things that are not ourselves, healthy adjustment is hard. When we are not so attached, when we are truly self-possessed, our freedom to learn, grow, improve, and even cope with profound loss all increase, because we know we are not our circumstances, not even our most precious or our most painful circumstances. We are who we are, not the petty or important things or people connected with us at any given point in time. That which transcends all of those circumstances is the part that is you. In the course of a lifetime, people are met by and transcend uncountably many changes in circumstances, sometimes seamlessly, sometimes joyously, and sometimes in agony. That is the nature of being human. Your life cannot be some other way than it is. You have existed and will continue to exist among many different sets of circumstances. Don't attach to them as if they are you, even if they are very important to you, very good for you, or seared into your heart and mind because of how bad they are for you. Enjoy and appreciate good conditions when you have them, but don't make the easy mistake of thinking they define you. Conversely, you might never want to lose this person, or this skill, or this recognition, or this whatever. But if you live long enough, you will lose many cherished people and things, and you will still be a you worth being. Quote, "There will always be someone who can't see your worth. Don't let it be you." Mel Robbins. Change is inevitable. When it comes, don't block your ability to adapt to it by attachment to the notion that change can't happen or shouldn't happen, or that a change in your circumstances makes you not you. Some changes feel that way. Some external changes do change us internally. Some devastate us. Some help us blossom. But there are no changes that make us not us. Changes help reveal us, reveal the answer to the question, who am I, across more and more circumstances. They don't change the answer by creating a new person. I think I personally slightly disagree with that. Just in so much as I don't think all changes reveal a truer us. I don't think every change to our personality that comes of circumstances and changes in our lives, I don't think it's right to say that those universally move us toward who we're supposed to be. Sometimes we get further from what we're supposed to be, and that sucks, but it happens. I think. And we just have to be conscious of the ways that we're changing and make sure that we're headed in a direction that aligns with our values. And if we're not, forgive ourselves and just keep it in mind as we work through it. The more pain you're going through, the less urgent it is to make sure that you're perfectly aligning with your values. But to the degree that you can endure, I think it's always important. We have a lot to figure out in life. We need to distinguish between healthy versus unhealthy attachments and constructive versus destructive striving. We need to seek balance amidst goals and circumstances that compete with each other and change over time, at the same time that we ourselves are changing. Being human is quite challenging. Being you means you are up to the challenge of being you. Illusion. Quote, "We saw it, and yet we didn't see it. Or rather, we were trained not to see it. It was a puzzling thing. The truth knocks on the door and you say, 'Go away, I'm looking for the truth.' And so it goes away." Robert Pirsig. Ooh, I like that. I like that one a lot. I like that one a lot. Life is so goddamn hard. Truth is increasingly hard to identify, but you can identify it and it's worth doing. Pirsig has said that his book isn't really about Zen or Pirsig has said that his book isn't really about Zen or about motorcycle maintenance, but the above excerpt from Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is pretty Zen. We are so conditioned by our preconceptions, our culture, our personal history, and even the language we speak, that even our most basic and seemingly objective direct perceptions are composed of much more denial, misperception, and outright illusion than we realize. Hold that thought. We will explore it in considerable detail as we proceed. Impermanence. Buddhists advise us to be aware of the paradoxical persistence of impermanence. Try that again. Buddhists advise us to be aware of the paradoxical persistence of impermanence. Things are ever-changing. This is not meant to say that all we ever do will be washed away, so why bother? The message is that the idea of non-change or permanence of something being static is false. We take how things are at a point in time, a moment in the unfolding of uncountably many interdependent processes, and we think and feel and act as if this is a permanent state. A rock may be a rock for a very long time, but we know it will eventually be eroded until it is no longer a rock, and we know this is happening in imperceptibly small, even microscopic changes all the time. While it is often practical to take things at face value and as durable, While it is often practical to take things at face value and as durable, nothing is only that. Indeed, that rock that is on its way to becoming sand was at other times absorbing... What the fuck? I'm having strokes today. Indeed, that rock that is on its way to becoming sand was at other times absorbed in something called mountain, or hill, or boulder, or dirt, and not individually distinguished at all. It is only a rock when it is useful to construe it as such, and paradoxically it is a rock whether we recognize it as such or not. So don't attach too strongly to even your most objective observations, or you may needlessly limit your thinking and your options. A lot of the time when people are certain about what they objectively know, they behave like jerks. We often won't know when something will change, so we should be emotionally ready to respond to either persistence or change, whichever occurs. Being alive is a dynamic and demanding affair. Impermanence is not only a promise of the eventual end of all things. Impermanence, otherwise known as change, I lost my place, is necessary for anything new to begin, and as Buddha said, to learn is to change. Beginning to put these things together, we see that the non-attachment is necessary at least because of impermanence. We see, as both Buddha and Plato did, that what is so is preceded and followed by so much impermanence that our best attempts to capture it give us something of an illusion. That illusion is often helpful, but sometimes limiting, misleading, or just mistaken, and frequently becomes outdated before we're ready for it too. That's my own aside. We work with a host of convenient conventions, rather than a full embrace of the oh my god. Very zen. We work with a host of convenient conventions, rather than a full embrace of the unmanageably immense reality we would allegedly comprehend if we were truly enlightened. Our frozen snapshots in time of uncountably many ongoing and interacting processes are useful. It is easy to make the case that they are necessary for us to function, yet we fail to recognize them as constructs we impose on a much more complex reality for the sake of chosen purposes. Since these snapshots are not reality itself, in addition to helping us, they also help us make mistakes. Reality is much larger than we comprehend, indeed much larger than we can comprehend. Reality might work against our present purposes when something we construe as X turns out to be a combination of X and Y, or just a Z that looks like an X. Reality might help us achieve a new and more desirable future reality, but only if we more accurately see what it already does and does not include. I want to restate that because I think that's an important bit. Reality and our beliefs ideally are very similar, but they are never the same. And the reason we know that is because everything that we know about reality has come to us through biologically evolved hardware that was designed for survival, not for truth. So we are inherently biased in absolutely every belief we have. Even things like gravity. Our theory of gravity is very strong. It probably represents reality. But we don't know that it does. We can't. Everything is filtered through our senses. We don't even know how many dimensions there are. So, we always have to have humility when we talk about really anything important. Because it's paradoxical. We have to be confident that our well-earned, well-reasoned beliefs are worth more than less-earned, less reasonable beliefs. We have to trust that our expertise and experience in given areas is worth more than the opinions in those areas of people who don't have that experience and expertise. We have to be aware that experts do make mistakes, and that sometimes a common person who has no idea how their part of the world works might actually have the answer. It really is just probabilities. Everything we do is based on probabilities. And so it's overly binary to say we either know something or we don't. We don't know anything. But that doesn't mean we should act like we don't know anything. Because the belief that gravity will always pull me toward the Earth is a lot more valuable than the belief that the moon is hollow and aliens live inside it surveilling us. Not because either of them is definitely true, and not because either of them is definitely false, but because One of them is much, 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 much more likely to be true. So that's where the humility comes in. Hi Pedro, I'm here to do crimes and eat strawberries, and I'm all out of crimes. Wait. You appear to be out of strawberries. Oh boy. Hello! Good to see you. Attachment to illusions of permanence. What gets us in the most trouble is the combination of the above big three factors. Attachment to illusions of permanence. What helps us most is the opposite. Think flexibly and humbly, because we know our knowledge is imperfect. Remain open. Recognize that the reality of a thing, person, or situation is bigger than we know, might change, our understanding of it might change, the views of other people who affect us might change, and we ourselves might change. Remain open. Recall that both change and consistency can take us by surprise, so anticipate both and be stunned by neither. Remain open. That's pretty dense. I'd like to have a story like The Tortoise and the Hare to explain it. Sadly, I don't. Assess and act based on the best you know at the time, but know that you could be wrong, and know that even if you are right, things may change. Don't overplay your illusion of certainty, and don't stress out about the inescapability of uncertainty. Don't condemn yourself or anyone else for making mistakes in a context that is constantly so complex that we unconsciously edit it all the time. Editing with unintended and unfortunate consequences happens very frequently. It's normal. Be open, flexible, humble, kind, and make a course correction. That is how we get better at observing what is so, and at moving on rather than being stuck. Notice that blame was not one of the steps in this sequence. The incompleteness of our knowledge. Quote, "Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance." Confucius. Quote, "If I am the wisest man alive, it is because I know one thing, and that is that I know nothing." Socrates. Imagine you are at the stage of life when you are about to move out of your parents' home. Among the many decisions you have to make is a very basic one. Will you live nearby, not so nearby, or far away? Where you end up living might change your social and physical environment in ways that have a big impact on you. Even without that, each time you move, where you live will haphazardly affect things as consequential as what jobs are available to you, who you meet, who you marry, the setting in which you raise children, and to some degree, your understanding of life and of yourself. Consider something much less monumental, such as whether you do laundry this evening, or go out to a movie. Perhaps as you do laundry, lint in the dryer's trap will ignite, causing a fire. Perhaps on your way to the movie, you will be hit by a car. Perhaps in the quiet solitude of doing laundry or in watching an exceptional movie, you will gain an insight or inspiration you use as a positive turning point in your life. I know a person who became an engineer because of the impact that the first Star Wars movie had on him as a kid. That in turn shaped where he went to college, who he met there, what jobs he took, who he met there, his standard of living, and who he married. I know a person whose understanding of his mother was radically changed by reading a novel. That in turn helped him better understand his father. And taken together, these things helped him to better understand himself. Neither a popular science fiction movie, it's science fantasy, Dad, or a novel would appear to be things of great personal consequence on the face of it, but here are just two examples of the disproportionate impact they can have. I've been not replaying because I never finished it, I've been playing the Talos Principle 2 off stream, and holy shit, that game is good! That game is so insanely well written. I've been finding it extremely thought-provoking, and it's really been changing my view on some things. I think I might have a different brain chemistry than I did when I was playing it before. I mean, I'm on Straterra now. I haven't been on that before or anything like it. And I think that's just making me more capable of thinking things through to a deeper level. And it's fun. It's a good game. I recommend it. Makes you smart. Hello, Asuka! Welcome, welcome, welcome. Did Thekla give you some really good viewpoints? Thekla actually had the most wisdom out of everybody else combined. Just kidding. For those who don't know, Thekla is a manic, radical religious figure. Not religious figure, religious person in the Talos Principle 2. And she is pretty much a caricature of religious fanatics. She has no redeeming qualities. Oh, you bought the first Talos Principle. Nice. I'll be playing that, son. Yeah, I think that the second game's story and philosophy is much richer than the first game, just because the first game only has, like, one character. But the first game is still very good in many ways. The puzzles are excellent. The atmosphere isn't bad. This track is kind of loud. Is it loud for you guys? It's loud for me. I could do something about that if I was smart. I did something about that because I'm smart. Yeah. Anyway. Neither a popular science fiction, fantasy, movie, nor a novel would appear to be things of great personal consequence on the face of it. But here are just two examples of the disproportionate impact they can have. When we decide to see a movie or read a book or take any action or inaction at all, we have no idea what the full set of consequences may be. We are in a state of significant ignorance even when we make even our most well-informed decisions. We may be subject to immensely consequential change even when we make our seemingly least important decisions. Our knowledge of even simple things is exceedingly incomplete. Everything we think we know is necessarily a gross simplification. Let's say that you know you got out of bed this morning. What could be simpler? Can you tell me what caused you to wake you when you did? Sure, I woke to my alarm this morning. Great. Can you tell me the various frequencies emitted by the alarm, or how they were generated? Or how your ear turned sound waves into nerve stimulation? How that stimulation propagated along which specific neurons until it reached other neurons in your brain? How that stimulation was converted into verbalized consciousness along the lines of, "Darn it, I have to get up now." Or how you came to have that as your response. You can't. If you somehow could, then we could just keep going to the next level of detail until you couldn't. This onion has an unfathomable number of layers, almost all of which properly go ignored. I really appreciate the italicized properly there, because that I feel like that idea can really trigger some people's OCD, and it's like, no, it's okay. I'm not saying you should think about all these things, I'm just pointing out that we don't. I wish I had the smart. I think you do. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention about the Talos Principle. The subtext of the first game is relatively straightforward. The second game is much more complex because there are much more competing ideas and viewpoints. I would strongly encourage anyone who plays the Talos Principle 2 to view literally everything that happens in the game in the context of, was civilization a good idea? Because it all comes back to that. And it is very directly referenced in the extended metaphor of Prometheus's fire. So when you're playing that game, just anytime anybody asks, should we? The question is, should we build civilization instead of just following our instincts in raw nature? And it's really rich. It's really good. For what it's worth, my opinion is yes. I think that... I don't know how much I've talked about how agriculture destroyed everything. I think I've done it a bit on these streams. But just a few days ago, the Talos Principle 2 made me rethink that. I still think that agriculture destroyed everything. I still think that life now is worse than it was when we were all near-naked hunter-gatherers with no electricity and no plumbing. I think those were better days. But I think we're on the way to something much greater. The question is, will we go extinct first? You've mentioned your agriculture views, and that's not to say I have anything against farmers. That makes it sound like I have something against farmers. I don't. Agriculture is so deeply necessary in today's world. So deeply necessary. But I've started thinking of it as we are in the puberty of humanity. And puberty sucks. And sometimes you wish you could just go back to before, but you know what's even better than being a kid? Being an adult. I know some people probably disagree with that. Being adult is much harder, and there's much more to worry about. But do you think you could reach the levels of, like, the depth of joy and fulfillment and purpose that you have as an adult when your brain wasn't as developed? No, there's no way. It's physically impossible. And I think that we might be in that place as a species. I don't know if this is gonna get, like, Twitch mad at me or something, but I want to point out the metaphor of suicidal teens. I think that our global society is, to some degree, suicidal right now. And most teenagers don't commit suicide, but our species is a sample size of 1. So either we do or we don't. If we don't, we will live long enough to see better times. Well, not you or me, but, you know, like, 6 generations from now could be great. Or we may end it too fast. Either way, you or I can't do anything about it. But we can be aware of that. I find that it gives me hope to think that we actually could be on the road to, like, a Star Trek kind of universe as opposed to a Star Wars kind of universe. Actually, I think a Star Wars universe is very unlikely. I think that interplanetary fascism is basically impossible, because I think that if fascism were ever strong enough to leave its home planet, it would just kill itself off first. We can hope. I think it can be done ethically and efficiently. There seem to have been lost ways of doing so while maintaining harmony with the land. I want to make a clarification, though. I'm not actually talking about agriculture as it is today at all. I'm talking about agriculture as a turning point in our evolution as a species. I don't think that anything we do regarding agriculture today will significantly change the course of humanity. Unless there's an extinction event involving food source. But I don't mean to say that, like, the world rests on the shoulders of... No. It does rest on the shoulders of farmers, but I mean, like, our destiny doesn't... It's not like the sole responsibility of farmers to get us out of this mess. I don't mean to point a finger like that at all. I'm just saying that before agriculture and after agriculture are significantly different periods in human history. And the 10,000, 12,000 years it's been since agriculture was invented, evolutionarily speaking, that's like a blink, that's like a second. So of course we're all fucked up still. It changed everything, and it's been barely any time. Hello in Bev? Hello in Revenant. I like having my developed brain. I'm a fan of my developed brain. You are not late, Accord. You are always on time. Hi, late. I think there's going to be a lot of big breaking points in the next century. I think so too. I'm both grateful and sad that I won't get to see some of them. I, for one, want space colonies like the Gundam series. I haven't seen Gundam. Sorry, I misunderstood. You meant in the whole. Yeah, no, don't apologize for misunderstanding. These are all complex topics, and I am not very experienced in talking about them, so I'm going to be unclear sometimes. Like the printing press. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And for the record, the printing press is actually my example of the reason we should be most grateful for agriculture. I don't think the printing press ever would have been invented or distributed widely without agriculture to root us in one place for long enough to become like a large community with a lot of resources to go around. And the printing press gave way to literature, which is, in my opinion, the most durable form of really, really deep artistic expression in terms of like how profoundly it can change somebody's life. So we are only able to reach the depths of philosophical and artistic and fulfilling thought because of agriculture. And so I've started thinking of post-agricultural life as playing humanity on hard mode. And some of us aren't good at playing games on hard mode. And some of us have no interest in playing games on hard mode, but we're all doing it. We're all here. And for those who are able to beat humanity on hard mode, they're gonna find it a much more enjoyable experience than beating it on easy mode. Because it's just gonna feel better. It's gonna take more and reward more. I'm not convinced my brain is developed yet, which makes sense. Your brain is certainly still changing, but it is developed. I know approximately how old you are. And yes, your brain is quite impressive. Twitch gave me a scare, said that the VOD was available after just 42 minutes of streaming. What the fuck? Hey, we all have a long way to go and much to learn. Actually, the thing that got me on this topic was we're reading about how that is always true, and one of the stupidest things we can do is forget that. Twitch needs to eat the strawberries too. Speaking of which, lack of detail like this is typically... we were just reading about how even in something as simple as "you got up today," there are countless implied steps within that sentence, such as like which neurons are firing, how your alarm clock is like producing vibrations, and how your brain is turning that into nerve impulses and all of that stuff. And we don't think about that at all, and that's okay, but it's important to point out that we are deliberately, utilitarianly ignoring most of reality most of the time. We should. It's the only way our tiny brains can function, but we need to be aware of that. We never end to learn! Yep. I'm 21, so I'm still transitioning into adulthood, but I'm starting to be happier again. I'm really happy to hear that for you. Good. I'm glad. And yeah, I have found... I think that in my early 20s to like my later 20s, I don't know that a ton changed. It's not like you hit 25 and you're like, bum, 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 upgrade complete. You just... You start learning stuff a little faster, noticing stuff a little faster, finding patterns a little faster. It's good. I like being an adult. Oh, we never stop to learn. Got it. Welcome in, Revenant. Lack of detail like this typically has positive utility. Lack of detail like this typically has positive utility. In a given context, limited knowledge is sufficient knowledge. But notice that in this example, awakening almost 100% of the information. In this example, awakening, almost 100% of the information has been discarded in something you said with complete knowledge and absolute certainty. Aside from the fact that we don't know everything there is to tell, like what happened at the subatomic level at each stage in the above process, we couldn't manage life if we tried to grasp everything at every level of detail simultaneously. If nothing else, it would take so much longer to say all of it than to do it that we'd fall irrecoverably behind with our first utterance. We have to simplify things to a for-purpose storytelling. So it's okay and even necessary that we edit out almost all of the information. But it is also dangerous because sometimes we unknowingly omit something of consequence. When I hit 25, my back gave out and my immune system turned off, but hey, at least my brain was allowed to exist in overdrive for a while. Have you guys seen that comic of, it's from Sarah Scribbles or Sarah Draws, I don't remember, but it's in reference to turning 30. She was saying, like, oh yeah, my brain's fully developed, I'm ready to go, and the heart's like, cool, I've been working hard, but I can go for decades more, and I'm pumped. And then the spine just walks up and it's like, I am old. So very old. It's great. I like the waking up analogy. Every now and then, I guess it's more of an example than an analogy. Every now and then I look at my hands and see all the veins and such moving around underneath and marvel just at everything we are, but at the same time is so normal. Your dad is right in how we just simplify things for the sake of going on. Yeah, I have the same moments. I think everybody does. It's kind of I think it's a really fun part of being just a complex machine, essentially. I mean, we've got so many hyper-specialized parts. And most of the time we take them for granted, and that's fine. We have to function. But taking a moment to appreciate it, like, even people who have, like, parts of their body missing, you can still be very appreciative of what's left. I mean, at the very least, having a heart and a brain is really fucking cool. Anyway. How about when you say with certainty why your spouse or child or any other person did something? How about when you assume something about a group of people as if they are not individually different? How about when you tell yourself why you did something you are not proud of? All of these ordinary situations, and infinitely many more, are ones in which you cannot possibly know everything that matters. And I want to point out that although we have a negative connotation with assuming something about a group of people as if they're not individuals, we all do that. And it's not always bad. I just did it right now when I said we all do that. That is an assumption about a group of people. It's just necessary for us to think about large-scale things. We can only think about so many things at a time, and so when we talk about large enough things, we have to start ignoring the smaller things. It's just, we don't have enough RAM up here. I wish we did. It would solve so many problems if we just had more RAM. But we don't. Anyway. We haven't even touched on misperceptions, or the distortions our brains silently impose on sensory perceptions. We haven't discussed how language shapes our thoughts, or how our habitual thought patterns, conditioned emotional responses, past experiences, and biological predispositions bias everything we feel and think. Every bit of our information is incomplete. Thus, everything we know relies on some degree of illusion to fill in the gaps, and I would argue some degree of faith. Saying that as an atheist, I think that everything we believe has an element of faith. This often works out well. That's great. It also often works out poorly, which is not so great. Acknowledging that we never know with absolute certainty that we have every bit of salient information fully and accurately available to us, and perfectly understood and perfectly integrated with everything else, let's move on to the illusions we create about information that we do have. That's a depressing sentence. We like forests, not trees, unless we like the trees, and then we don't like the, I don't know, the fucking cells. Unless we like the cells, and then we don't like the atoms. Hyper-specialized, huh? And then paraphrasing Neil deGrasse Tyson, we have sewage and an entertainment system in the same area and using a few of the same parts. Yes, and that's awful. I think I've mentioned before that I think that the animal digestion system is single-handedly proof that there is no God. I would go into detail on this, but I don't think anyone wants me to. But I really do believe that a close look at any animal's digestion will prove to you that there is no God. However, bodies are still really fucking cool. Because they're complex machines, and complex machines are inherently cool. I also, the Talos principle points this out in a few different ways, and I think it's really awesome. The Talos principle itself is... Well, the story of Talos is a story in which basically a golem is made that has a vein of, like, ichor or blood or mercury or whatever, and if that vein spills, Talos dies. And the argument is like, so what is the difference between Talos and a human? And there are many obvious answers, but if you ignore the specifics of the situation and broaden it, what it's really saying is, if there is nothing supernatural about self-awareness, that means, by definition, it is possible to build sentience. And that's really cool to me. The only way it's not possible to construct sentience out of raw materials is if sentience is supernatural. That's the only way. That's awesome. That's really cool. I agree with you, though. It is incredible how the human body works. I mean, just purely that it works at all. Yeah. Faith is not exclusive to religion. No, not at all. We all need to have some faith in something. Yes. Whether it be people or maybe a concept. I don't even necessarily mean, send me a strawberry, hi Fleta. I would love you to go into detail. Okay, I'm gonna go into detail. One sec. I want to finish catching up with chat first. Oh no, we went through my whole playlist and I forgot to turn repeat on. Whatever will I do? This. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I don't even mean faith in terms of faith that gives you hope and keeps you going. I just mean faith in terms of, like, if I read a study in a scientific journal that is reputable and peer-reviewed and has a large sample size that has been responsibly sampled with minimized bias, I will have faith that those experiment results are valid. I will have faith in that. Even though it's not, like, core to my identity, even though it's not core to what I do that day, I will add that to what I consider true, even though I don't know that it's true. And similarly, like, I don't know that I'm awake right now, but I have faith that I am because it sure is convincing. You know, sometimes when you're a dream, you're like, this might be a dream, I'm not sure, but I've never been in a dream and asked myself, am I in a dream? And been like, absolutely 100% definitely no. But right now, I can say absolutely 100% definitely no, I'm not dreaming. There's too much physical consistency. But I am still taking that on faith. The detail, oh no! That's what you meant too? Okay, cool. I have faith that the food I buy from the shop won't kill me upon consumption. Same, eating takes a lot of faith. I'm fairly sure that the request for detail was about the digestion system. It was, but I wanted to finish that thought. Okay, here's the digestion system argument. Actually, let me make sure I don't leave anything out. I took notes on my phone at some point, because I'm stupid. Digestion. Okay. Point 1. We have to eat other organisms with terrifying volume and frequency just to continue functioning, and all we get out of it is the, 10% of components and energy of their flesh that we happen to be able to metabolize on our own. One human life requires the death of millions of life forms. Point 2. The rest of it, the rest of the flesh we eat, in other words, the majority, comes back out of us as a fucking potentially deadly biohazard that has to be disposed of for both health and comfort. We have to do this every day, and if we refuse to, we die. Point 3. Constantly consuming food makes us inherently vulnerable to poisoning several times a day. Yeah, we have a fun emergency function for some situations, vomiting, but it is physically exhausting and feels very, very bad. Point 4. If our mostly involuntary muscles mess up during swallowing, we could die. Or, I actually wrote four times in here. Does God manipulate little gobs of food to assassinate certain people, including many, many, many children, by means of asphyxiation? We already have a whole sensory organ for breathing. Why are those tubes connected? There's no need for those tubes to be connected. Point 5. Photosynthesis has none of these problems at all and was already a thing. Sure, photosynthesis can't sustain a life form as big as a human, but why are we so big? Is this scale ideal given the size of molecules? Cool. Make molecules smaller, God. Actually, why do you have to follow the laws of physics? God, didn't you write them? Didn't you break them to be born? Why did you just put in this horrible jury-rigged system like a sleep-deprived software engineer in crunch time instead of just making physics a little different? I forgot how angry I got when I was writing that. The point is, whether you believe in evolution or Genesis or anything in between, plants came first. Photosynthesis had already been invented when humans came into the picture. So if there's a God, he was like, fuck him. I wrote these notes a few months ago because I was on set and incredibly bored. The point about needing to stave away our excretions for our own safety, that even resonates back to cyanobacteria that oxygenated the earth so hard that they made it less habitable for themselves. That's true. A lot of life, even beyond animals, has very hazardous waste. Plants were just not good enough for God. Nope. Photosynthesis? Tried it. Wasn't for me. Now that I have fully alienated every theist who might have been watching stream, let us continue. We should all just transfer our minds to machines. Okay, here's the thing. Because for a long time I actually did kind of feel that way. I was like, God damn, why do we have to deal with all of the inconveniences of having a human body just to, play video games? But Recently, I started to appreciate my physical body more. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's because I've been a little more physical lately, and that's reminding me that moving is fun. Having a physical body that can exert strength and challenge itself and grow and change its environment is fun. The only reason that I'm comfortable giving it up is because I don't do it enough. And I'm hoping that if I succeed in becoming an electrician, I will be physical more often to the point where I will more readily appreciate having a physical body. Because right now I really do feel like a brain in a jar would be an upgrade. Only Theus left. You asked for it, so I don't have to feel bad. Anyway. Where was I? At one moment, an apple might appear to have the meaning food. But that is not actually the meaning of an apple in and of itself. An apple has no inherent meaning. Everything is simultaneously more than we think of it and less. An apple is food for some animals, some molds, and it is one of the fruits many diabetics can eat. It is also evidence of an apple tree, a source for making a new apple tree, an attractant of ants, a source of fragrance, something that will spoil and become a smelly mess, a low-voltage battery, a paperweight, something that can be made into a particular type of doll head. Is he avoiding the time? I think that's my dad being politically correct in his reference to the shrunken head voodoo dolls of the 90s. I don't know if all of you are old enough to remember these, or if they're still a thing, but when I was a kid, people would like use toothpicks and beads and other decorations to like carve a face into an apple, decorate it however you want, and then just like hang it up and watch it shrivel up and die. And that was a fun activity for children. But you know, the phrase shrunken head voodoo dolls is not exactly internationally sensitive. 1890s, I did it multiple times. Apparently Pedro did it at least once. I was mainly being silly, but you know, fair point. It can be fun to push your body. No, I know you were being silly, and the only reason I went off on that tangent is because it's something I have explicitly thought about many times. I love hearing other takes on this. That's really refreshing, and for what it's worth, I'm always willing to hear other people's perspectives. I always reserve the right to decide, that ain't for me, but I always want to hear it, because if I'm not aware of it, then I can't consider it. Your father totally has a battery made out of apples. I don't think he does. For one, that is not a long-term possession. Oh, has made a battery out of apples. That makes more sense. Yeah, maybe he has. Oh, I was in the middle of a sentence. It can also be a symbol of temptation, a symbol of discord, a symbol of a music company, a symbol of a consumer electronics company, an object of convenient size, shape, and weight for throwing, and just a particular arrangement of molecules. An apple has no meaning at all, and more than all of the above conditions and uses, which we often mistake for meaning. Notice that eating an apple can address your hunger. Noticing that eating an apple can address your hunger is a good thing. What's bad is when we make connections without realizing how they constrain the rest of our thoughts. When a particular subset of facts that we find accessible or convenient in some snapshot of time is taken to be something's meaning, its durable identity, its nature, we foreclose opportunities to understand and relate to it in other ways. I think, like, to bring that back to the apple example, what he's saying is, if you were just to think of apples as, oh, food, cool, nice, maybe you would eat every apple on your tree, and you wouldn't do anything to replant the seeds, and you would just move on to the next apple tree after that. And eventually the apple trees would die out, and you would be like, I have no food, and I don't understand why. Your dad might qualify for a degree in ontology, too. You'll have to remind me what ontology is. Throwing him so off today. I'm just thrown off a lot. I'm throwing you guys off, too. Just a miscommunication station, but hey, we're always catching the miscommunications. And that's pretty impressive for any group of people, no matter how small. This is the not self idea, the emptiness idea previously discussed. It's not that the apple is not a solid object, or not an apple in the usual sense. It's that an apple is so many things, and the product of so many processes, and a precursor of so many possible futures, that our conventional way of thinking about it as something static and self-contained with a finite and well-known set of purposes discards almost 100% of the information. Ontology is the branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being and a set of concepts and categories in a subject, area, or domain that shows their properties and the relations between them. Honestly, I don't think he qualifies for a degree in that. I mean, I talked about, now that I know what it is, I talked about ontology in a fucking drama class in college once. So, I don't know about that, but he does have a unique way of thinking about things. Epistemology, this theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its methods, validity, and scope, and the distinction between justified belief and opinions. Yeah. Soma, indeed. Yes, I have played Soma. I had to stop when it got to the deep sea trench, because fuck that. I have tried multiple times to get past it, and I cannot make myself walk over that trench on the catwalk. Thalassophobia, yes. Or is it Thassallophobia? That. Yes, I absolutely have that. RIP. But I do know the ending. I'm very familiar with the philosophy presented in Soma, and I think it's one of the best written games ever. I think Soma is a phenomenal exercise in philosophy. And it's also really spooky in a fun way. Besides the Thassallophobia. No fucking thank you. I will take my leave, sir. Yeah. But yes, I think my dad is definitely a very good epistemologist, regardless of what... I don't actually know if he ever, like, took a class in epistemology specifically. But, he could teach one. He is teaching one. Did you reply to my prompt about seeing the future in confusion? Oh, I guess not. Maybe a mind-blowing thought for some. Imagine if you could see the future, how disorienting it would be regarding what your actual present is or isn't. This is actually one of the main reasons I can't believe an omnipotent or benevolent God exists. If he was either, he wouldn't make suffering necessary for life to exist. I feel like, although I agree, in fairness, I want to point out that that in itself does carry some assumptions of its own. But I do feel that way. But yes, in terms of seeing the future, I mean, that immediately brings so many questions like, well, can you change that future? Is it inevitable? If it's inevitable, is that because there is a record in the universe somewhere of fate as it's supposed to happen? Or is it just because things are inevitable because the things that we, like, our stimuli are actually the only things that determine what happens next, and we just think that we're making free will decisions? Which is something I think about often, actually. I'm not sure I believe in free will. I think it is entirely possible that... I know for a fact that some people go their entire lives without making a free will decision. I'm confident of that. But I don't know if anybody can make a free will decision. Every single thing we do is informed by our entire lives, and also by what we've been thinking about most recently. If you do anything, and somebody says, "Why did you do that?" and you say, just felt like it. No, even that's a reason. If you say no reason, you're not actually saying there wasn't a reason. You're saying you have no response that you're willing to give, or no response that you have articulated for yourself. If you justify your decision and you're like, I weighed the pros and cons and one side won out over the other for me, then did you really make a free will decision, or are you just following the analytics that your brain performed based on the situation at hand? Either way, I think it's very useful to believe in free will, even if it doesn't exist. Because if you don't believe you have free will, you will make you are likely to make the mistake of, it doesn't matter what I do, like everything will take care of itself. Which would be a case of the idea of there not being free will affecting your future decisions, regardless of whether you have free will or not. So if that thought takes root in your mind, it could change your life for the worse, even if it's true. A lack of free will would never be an absence of responsibility. Right. I remember seeing this guy who was saying, like, we shouldn't put people in, like, we shouldn't punish people for committing crimes because there's no free will, so they can't help that they did it. And I'm like, buddy, I think you missed the point. For one, we don't punish people to make them sad. We punish people for two reasons. One is to protect the rest of us, or maybe the person themselves, and the other is to try to influence their future behavior. Neither of those conditions requires free will to exist. So I don't know what the fuck he was talking about. Especially if you're persuading a group of people to stop punishing people because it's not fair, then you are inherently saying that your actions can change the future behavior of other people. You are implying that by persuading somebody to do something. So it's a self-defeating argument. Anyway. I still think about Soma occasionally, even though it came out some time ago now. Yeah. I'm thinking more like you're seeing your first-person point of view from the future, intermittently interspersed into the present. Like That's So Raven. You might only know that you're in the present when you remember going through something that you're presently going through again. Oh, that's crazy. So not like That's So Raven, because she knew when she was having a vision. But then how is that different from memory? Shit, I would have to think about that for longer than I care to in this moment. Free will, to an extent. Free will, asterisk. Honestly, the idea that free will doesn't actually exist really scares me more than a lot of things. Then pretend I didn't bring it up, because it is a real thing. For all intents and purposes, I can honestly say it is a real thing. Because pretending that it isn't, and or accepting that it isn't, can only hurt us. That is, like... That is the only thing I can think of where it's like, if this is true, it should not be known. In general, I think truth is almost universally more valuable than any alternative. I think this is an exception. We owe it to ourselves to act as though we have free will. We owe that to ourselves and each other. Jonathan gives food for thought, but you're free to put the food aside until you want it. Hell yeah! And Revenant, too. But also, I like to think that's quite Buddha of me. Since, in this book, we're saying that he always said, like, take what you want from what I'm saying and leave the rest, and if what I'm saying in the future no longer is useful to you, then forget it. And that's kind of what my dad's talking about here, is just because something is true right now, pretty much guarantees that it won't be later. With minor exceptions, like, there will probably always be gravity. But yeah, some things will be true for the entire time that you and I are alive. Such as, that poster behind me will exist. I can't say that with absolute certainty, but 99% certainty. But then there are many other things that will change in our lifetimes, whether we want them to or not, and we've got to respect that to stay abreast of the situation. Responsibility is still fundamental to interactions, whether or not free will is the actionable source of a cause and its effect. Maybe that's a comfort? That's how I feel. Because, to me, responsibility is both if you take responsibility, you are conditioning your thoughts, words, and actions in favor of society at large. That's what that means to me. Even if it's just responsibility in a way that improves your life and no one else's. That's still improving society at large because you're part of it. And most of the time, if you take responsibility for something, it will affect another person in a positive way. And in terms of holding other people responsible, that's an important part, not because of vengeance. I strongly disagree with vengeance and revenge. I guess that's the same thing. I don't think that there is ever a good reason to impose suffering for its own sake. I think that punishment is extremely necessary in society because we do need to exert pressure on what behaviors we allow and don't allow. But at that point, we're talking about responsibility. We're talking about teaching and changing and protecting. We're not talking about suffering. We're not talking about, like, we put this person in prison because he has to be sad now. That's not the reason, or it shouldn't be. The Good Place kind of talks about that, the whole concept of ethics and why we should help each other out or take responsibility, like you say. I didn't watch all of The Good Place, but I saw the first few seasons, and God, it's good. God, that's good. That is delicious. Where was I? Oh yeah, apples. Delicious. Constrained thinking means we might have come to a wrong conclusion. We definitely missed out on a huge amount of information, always necessary, usually helpful, but not always good. And we have mentally blinded ourselves to many possible next moments while living in a fantasy that we possess complete, accurate, and certain knowledge. This opens us up to errors in judgment about even really simple events, and also sets us up to be surprised when something completely possible happens next. It stunts our creativity in pragmatic problem solving, expressive art, and everything in between. It's a comfort I feel because I have to remember my actions still matter regardless of the source of those actions. Absolutely. I strongly believe that, Asuka. So, if that helps, great. And frankly, I to some degree, I regret bringing up free will. Because because I'm so used to freely expressing my thoughts, I sometimes forget that that one thought probably shouldn't be expressed. It's not helpful. It's just not. There is no useful application for that opinion. In my mind, I view this kind of thing in a type of balance. I'm responsible for whatever I say or do, even if my circumstances have nurtured or primed me into taking a certain action. Now, with the perspective important, I can reassure myself that I almost-ish must have taken the action that I did take, but I still have to own up to it. There is some ease of mind in thinking that something in one's life couldn't have happened any other way than it did. I think that's true. I think that guilt and regret do play an important role, but in the same way that the goal of punishment is never to cause suffering, the goal of guilt and regret should always be self-education. It should always be, what could I have done differently so that I can apply that hypothetical to future situations. We're allowed to be sad for the consequences of mistakes that we made, but we don't get to eternally punish ourselves for something that we can't change. That's the same as hating yourself for, like, the color of your eyes. You can't change it anymore. So move on. Have you read Vinland Saga? No, I haven't. Goes into someone trying to overcome revenge, basically fueling his life. Personally, my favorite manga of all time. Nice. Nice. Trying to think. There's got to be something Brandon Sanderson wrote that I read that has a similar vibe. I love Brandon Sanderson. He's so good. If you haven't heard of Brandon Sanderson, maybe you've heard of the Stormlight Archives or the Mistborn trilogy. He's a fantasy writer, and frankly, I usually don't like fantasy. I feel that fantasy worlds are usually built to be too much like The Lord of the Rings or Dungeons and Dragons for my taste. I really like speculative fiction with original lore. And so if I open a fantasy book and they talk about, like, the dwarven mines, I'm already not very interested. I've read that story a million times. I like good, but Brandon Sanderson writes words, but like good words. He does write a ridiculous amount. He has accidentally made novels, god damn him. Thorfinn really is a well-written character, even if he starts out extremely archetypical, but yeah, I agree. I stopped at some point, but I got through a lot. But Brandon Sanderson's fantasy is always very unique. The Mistborn trilogy has a magic system about people who can metabolize different kinds of metal into various consistent powers. So not in terms of like X-Men or My Hero Academia where everybody's different, but actually where everybody is the same, but what makes them different is which metals they're able to metabolize. That's a really rich system. I like it a lot. And then Stormlight Archives, I don't even know where to begin with that magic system. There's so much. The reason I like original speculative fiction so much is because I find it very interactive in that it's almost a sort of puzzle solving. I get to see conflicts that I've never seen anywhere else and actually predict what might happen because the rules of that world are consistent. That's fucking fun! Anyway, where was I? At some point, I'm gonna read the book during this stream. The idea of emptiness is meant to counter what Buddhism holds as the ultimate illusion, that people and things exist as separate entities, even though we are really one with everything. You, me, that snake, that bear, that deadly virus, that speck of dust on the other side of the world, that molecule of hydrogen on that planet in another galaxy. Every apparent thing is really just an illusory aspect of one true, coherent, integrated, single whole. Buddhism means this literally, that there really is only one thing, and each seemingly individual person and grain of sand and speck of dust are illusory in their apparent separateness. According to Buddhism, a human can, after many lifetimes of spiritual growth, experience this wholeness directly, fully, and permanently. Achieving this ends all of our personal illusions and all of our personal dissatisfaction and suffering, and we are freed from the need to reincarnate again. This is enlightenment. Silicon is a metal, so if I absorb it, I become an android? That's right, yes! That's how the world works in Mistborn. No. This is actually not a mobile phone game. This is... Is it available on mobile? I don't think it is. It's a factory simulator. I bought it a few months ago, and I just really loved this track in particular. I've mentioned before in a previous Eat the Strawberries stream, it regularly... I'm just gonna play it again, because I do really like this track. It oscillates between parallel major and minor keys on a very regular basis, and that makes the chord progression super interesting. Like, this is minor, but then major. And it does that through the whole thing. It's like minor, 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 minor for like 6 measures, and then major for 2 measures. Yeah. Not to say that it's like 6 minor chords and then 2 major chords. I don't actually know what chords are major and minor, but the key is major for minor for 6 measures and then major for 2 measures, and it just keeps swapping like that, and it's so nice. I love music that does that. Extremely good reviews on Steam too. That's why I picked it up. I was looking for a nice idle game. It's not an idle game. It's an automation game, which is similar, but very different, because if you are idle in an automation game, nothing fucking happens. Da, 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 da. By the way, a very similar idea pervades Greco-Roman thought. In particular, within Stoicism, it is held that the universe is a single living entity permeated by a divine rational principle known as the Logos, which organizes and animates the cosmos, functioning as its soul. This anima mundi, or world soul, is the alleged ultimate ground, connection, and animating force of all living beings and of the universe in general, and infuses the universe with intelligence. We don't need to agree with either Eastern or Western mystical cosmology to see that our way of regarding things, events, ideas, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, ourselves, other people, everything, is far less complete than we usually notice. When we are emotionally stuck, when something doesn't seem right, when we are in emotional pain, or when we need to be more creative, recalling that everything is both more extensive and more interconnected than we usually notice may be very helpful. Anima Mundi must be Pedro's high school band name. I was technically in a high school band. I mean, I was in high school band, but I was technically in a band in high school, by which I mean the 4 of us decided to make a band. We made a website, we had a name. We were definitely the first teenagers in history to come up with the band name Naturally Sharp. And then we never rehearsed or performed ever. Not once. That was fun. I keep losing my place, because you guys are fun to talk to. Orchestra is just a big band. Good pun, thank you. I made it myself. No one else has thought of it before. Buddhist emptiness argues against over-attachment to just one static conceptualization of any person, thing, or event, when reality is much larger and much more dynamic than such a reduction. What happens when, instead of seeing the complexities of a human life I see a particular human as a good apple or a bad apple, like me or not like me, friend or foe. Oh, that was a question. Let me say that again. What happens when instead of seeing the complexities of a human life, I see a particular human as a good apple or a bad apple, like me or not like me, friend or foe? So much has been discarded in these simplifications that it is best we recognize them as illusions. In their implicit claim on completeness and correctness, they are distortions that distract us from the fullness of reality. That limits our perceptions, choices, and actions. The first band ever didn't need to release music. That's true, they were already innovative, huh? We cannot go through life with no notions about apples. We should not go through life refusing to learn that a certain person is likely to do us harm. But we can go through life aware that all our notions, however useful in some situations, are less than the full reality before us. When we do that, we make room for extraordinary perceptions, thought, feelings, actions, and outcomes. This advice applies inwardly as well. It is best not to think of yourself as the set of stories you have accumulated to define yourself, your solid view of yourself. No one can be entirely empty of habitual constructs of themselves and the world, and it would be crippling to attempt it. But we should put considerable time into more fully grasping the answers to the questions, who have I been, who am I now, and who will I yet be? Quote, "Pay attention to your patterns. The way you learn to survive may not be the way you want to continue to live." Thelma Bryant Davis. That's a deep cut. I'm gonna read that one again, because it bears repeating. The way you learned to survive may not be the way you want to continue to live. Ooh! That's good! Thank you, Thelma Bryant Davis. I don't know who that is, but I like her. Pablo Escobar can't just be reduced to having been a bad apple. Yeah, especially because I don't recognize that name. We routinely add meaning to the objects of our thoughts that simultaneously make them both more and less than they are. Attachment to illusion is like following a magician's misdirections. Our ideas about a certain person or ourselves or the game of chess or the sport called soccer or anything are just that, ideas about reality, not reality itself. This is sometimes referred to as the menu-meal distinction. The menu-meal distinction. Scholars most often refer to it as the map-territory distinction. The map is not the territory it depicts, just as the menu is not the meal. Good maps help us navigate, but the actual navigation has to happen in the real world, not on the map. Bad maps impede our progress by leaving us unprepared for reality, but even the best maps are not reality itself, or even perfect representations of reality. As worthwhile as it is to make the best maps we can, they never entirely capture the reality they are meant to represent. Also, if somebody just told me to use Google Earth to get to the store, I would punch them. Bears repeating? So many bears! Hi, Clint. The way you survive... the quote was, "Pay attention to your patterns. The way you learned to survive, past tense, may not be the way you want to continue to live." I did misspeak the first time. I said it in present tense, which was misleading. Since when did you have a Vivi poster? I've had that for... Hey, you remember when you gave me the teal poster behind me, over a year ago? That's when I put the Vivi poster up, but I had that when I was in my previous apartment, too. I've had that since, 2018. Attack came off the bottom corner, and I haven't had the motivation to fish under the bed to find it. I know that boy. Now I know that boy. Oh, did you recently play Final Fantasy IX? Is that what he's from? It is, right? 9? Nice! Here's a secret. I haven't played Final Fantasy IX. I just really like Vivi's design. But I really like this map territory distinction. I think that's an excellent metaphor. No matter how good things look on the menu, we eat the meal, not the menu. No matter the impression the menu has made on us, we don't know what we feel and think about the meal until we eat the meal. Yet note that the menu can significantly affect how we feel and think about the meal, or whether we will even try the meal. Ideas are a kind of map, helping us navigate reality while not being the reality they represent. It's easy to forget this, and much trouble arises from that. As told in the Lankavatara Sutra, I think, the idea of emptiness extends to the point of every apparent thing being an unreality constructed by the mind, including the mind itself. There is no birth, life, or death, and hence no reincarnation. There is no physical reality at all, just a single, universal, unembodied consciousness. We are told that this universal consciousness invents illusions of separate physical entities, including sentient beings, for the seemingly pointless purpose of deluding itself into thinking such things are real until it stops deluding itself via enlightenment. Footnote: I have come across no suggestion of why an all-inclusive and perfect consciousness would want to do this. A notion is sometimes expressed that humans in particular are the universe examining itself, but a complete and coherent one that is and comprehends everything all at once would, by definition, have nothing unknown or evolving left to explore. In fact, this is the very premise of enlightenment and the end of needing to reincarnate. Yeah, so what he's saying there, I don't think he quite comes out and says it plainly. The problem with the idea of reincarnation in the Buddhist sense is that it claims that we were once whole, and then for no reason we got segmented off, and then we had to go through centuries of learning to stop being that segmented off part, as if we had failed in some way or sinned in some way and now had to learn the value of being. It doesn't follow. If we were part of a whole and the whole is the only thing that exists, then the only thing that could cause the whole to become a segmented part separate from itself, illusorily, would be that whole. So it wouldn't have anything to learn about the whole because it would have just been the whole. There's no impetus for this separation, for this part of the whole to become something that thinks it's a person or animal or thing. That doesn't make sense. Impetus, maybe boredom? Honestly, I think that if the entire universe is so bored that it has to give itself amnesia and work through trauma in order to remember how to go back to being bored, it's not a very good universe. A donut hole. Look, this is just my beliefs talking, and my dad's. I can't say with any certainty that reincarnation is not real, but I do think that, I mean, in my opinion, like all belief systems, all religious belief systems, I do think that there are really bizarre gaps of logic in really important parts of the dogma. Good Knives Out reference. I love Knives Out. We are given this as the Buddha's own description of literal ultimate reality. With apologies to those who take it as such, this refutation of the real world strikes me as nonsense rather than fact, but it has functioned as a good koan for me. A koan is a teaching device in Zen. It is meant to help one jump from frustrated rational thinking to intuitive understanding. I spent several frustrating hours trying to carefully word the precise ways in which I find this sutra to be complete nonsense. Its confusing circularity led to a confusing circularity in my analysis, so round and around I went until I suddenly saw a solid, familiar, and embarrassingly obvious Zen lesson in it, and got that familiar lesson at a deeper level. That is, I went from frustrated rational thinking to an intuitive insight. In fact, this sutra, which is not presented as a koan, now strikes me as the perfect koan to capture the entity of Buddhism in a nutshell. In the real world, the inescapable simplifications, misconstructions, and misunderstandings of our mental models collaborate in elaborate fictitious world building. This is the classic Buddhist idea of illusion. Our imperfect, mind-built world includes likewise imperfect ideas about the mind that built it. Our illusions are so extensive and unconscious that they appear to us to be reality. Dukkha is largely due to us making mistakes, mistaking our illusions for reality. So what better way to say, none of that distracting stuff matters, than to make the details of the storytelling so distracting that one gives up rational argument and just gets it intuitively. I was distracted by the purposeless premise and circular logic of this sutra for several hours. It is given to us not as an illusion, but as the ultimate non-illusion, the ultimate true description of reality given by Buddha himself. But recall our earlier observations that any truth to be conveyed might be wrapped in a storytelling containing no facts at all. If providing a fable, koan, joke, or any other telling of a truth wrapped in a bunch of non-facts helps, that's all that matters. That's exactly what matters. That's all that an egoless Buddha would care about. As we saw in The Tortoise and the Hare, the art of the story lies in what it transmits, not what it literally says. And to that point, I want to point out that everything that we believe comes from narratives. Because if nothing we experience is the full picture, that means everything we experience is a story. And that's why fiction matters. Because it is only... The only difference between fiction and non-fiction is that we can tell the difference. From frustrated rational thinking to passionately frustrated thinking. No. From frustrated rational thinking to intuitive conclusion. Quote, Buddhism demands that we act in accordance with what our own insight reveals and not take anyone else's word for anything. If someone comes and tells us something, we must not believe him without question. Even me. Because I'm dumb. We must listen to his statement and examine it. Then if we find it reasonable, we may accept it provisionally and set about trying to verify it for ourselves. Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. I'm sorry, Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. I wish I could say your name right. In contemplating the Lankavatara Sutra, first try, I, stupidly, took it on its own terms as the Buddha's own description of reality, instead of yet another map, illusion, parable, or riddle. What I had before me was not reality wrapped up in a few sentences, it's just a way of thinking about reality that might be useful in some contexts, and as an impediment in others. It's just another parable. Of course the story is nonsense, it's just the story, not the teaching. For me, in this sutra, at least in this instance of reading it, the teaching is this meta-teaching of all parables. Of course the story is not the message. Find the teaching that is embedded in the story. My dad's cool. So much of what we think of as solid and real is created in our minds. So much of what matters in our lives is not what happens to us, but how we respond to what happens to us. It is useful to frequently note that we are always reacting to our stories about reality rather than reality itself. Sometimes we are using really poor maps, and sometimes just the wrong map for the current job. We are never using a perfect map. There is no such thing. To my mind, this single idea is Zen in a bottle. It's the whole core lesson. Everything else is corollary. Illusion of permanence, attachment to illusion, and second arrow suffering are all about what happens inside our minds, not what happens outside our minds. They are all just maps and circumstances. Inside of our minds is where we find the answer to who am I? Our behavior is how we express the answer. Everything beyond that is just maps, not reality, and circumstances, not identity. The world contains happy, gracious, generous poor people, and wretched rich people, educated idiots, and intuitive geniuses, every manner of person in every manner of circumstances. As Buddhism implores us, we should not identify with our circumstances. We have circumstances. We live in circumstances. But we are not composed of circumstances. Dwelling in our illusions of permanence, we tend to see things as being static when in fact, change is ever ongoing. We seize upon circumstances that have changed, are changing, and will continue to change, and act as if change itself does not exist. Let's go back to our apple. At one moment, the apple we talked about above is two distinct entities, an unfertilized ovum sitting in a flower, and a grain of pollen clinging to a bee's body. Later, it is a just fertilized ovum, an ovum-pollen fusion, a single cell. In the next moment, it is literally growing exponentially. In some later moment, a single apple may be ripening in some cells and decaying in others. An apple is not a static thing. It is an uncountably large number of biochemical processes and structural forces that are the culmination of sun, rain, soil, gravity, and a plethora of other factors that are in turn the culmination of billions of years of planetary development, that are in turn just minutiae in the life cycle of a galaxy that is incomprehensibly older, more complex, and just one of many galaxies in an unimaginably large and expanding universe. In each next moment, that apple will be a little different, as its cells metabolize some nutrients and produce some wastes, and some replicate while others die. These details could be extended to the atomic and subatomic levels and beyond that, or expanded to the planetary ecosystem or beyond that. Either way, we will reach the end of our understanding long before reaching the completeness of its reality. I said, in each next moment. We can't even definitively say what should count at this moment and what should count at the next. Our cognitive maps of reality are just maps of varying quality, not reality. Who cares? For practical purposes, an apple doesn't change so quickly in ways that matter to us that we need to track all of that. Let's just call it an apple and move on. That's practical. Good advice for the large set of circumstances where it works. But because it works well so often, we think it is always true and apply it even when it isn't true, or isn't salient, or isn't helpful, or even works against us. We give it a single name, apple. But that small word implies so many things that we normally ignore. Let's apply this to people. Add to the already endless list of factors for an apple the human complexities of personality, personal history, the context of a given culture, of a given relationship, of a given day. We unconsciously take snapshots in time, freezing the momentary state of dynamic processes and react to them as if they are inalterable facts across all time, attachment to the illusion of permanence. Even the illusion of semi-permanence diminishes that which brought us to this moment, all that is happening within this moment, and all that may yet occur in subsequent moments. That simplification is useful, even necessary, but sometimes it is critically limiting. Quote, "We do not describe the world we see. We see the world we can describe." René Descartes. That's another good one. That's a fucking pearl. I think he's cool too. Apples are cool. It's interesting how your dad mixes Buddhist teachings with, I suppose you could call it, general philosophy. Well, he says earlier in the book, and I think it bears repeating, this is not a book about Buddhism. It is... Sometimes it can feel like my dad learned about Buddhism and wrote a book about it. But what happened is he learned about himself and then learned that Buddhism agreed and wrote a book about that. This is not a book to make you a better Buddhist. It is a book to make you a better person, and it happens to have a lot of Buddhist teachings because Buddhism gets a lot of shit right. That's his claim anyway, and I agree with it. But in keeping with today's theme, it's not the truth. It's just something that I find to be a very accurate map. They are more musings. Where was I? Oh, instead of always seeing the world as a collection of solid things, we should sometimes see it as an endless stream of interdependent changes. Our apple is not a static, solid thing, but a cognitively imposed snapshot in time of a series of interdependent processes. The snapshot will likely be useful, but it sometimes is limiting or misleading, and sometimes militates against our best interests. If we only think of an apple as a precursor to an apple tree, and not also as a human consumable food, that would be a fatal oversight if one were starving to death. If we only think of it as food and not as a precursor to an apple tree, that might be a fatal error for a starving descendant if we fail to plant apple seeds today. I jumped the gun on that one, I brought it up earlier. The actually dynamic nature of things asks us to see all nouns as verbs, all appearance of stability as just how things are at a moment in time that one cannot hold on to. That's interesting. I like the concept of thinking of apple as a verb. Hi, Meg! Just like, hey, do you want that thing that's appling right now? What? You mean the apple? I feel it's limiting to call it an apple, but it's appling right now. I love that. That's great. That needs to be in a script. Buddhism kind of feels like a set of teachings that the mindful Buddhist is intended to not only overcome but surpass, acknowledging the flaw in everything that is taught because acquisition of knowledge and wisdom is inherently a personal journey. I like the way you said that. Yeah. I'm sure there are many Buddhists who would disagree, but if we're to go to the core meaning of most of Buddha's teachings, yeah, he's inherently saying, like, I've got a lot of ideas that I think are super good, and I'd like to share them with you, and then I disavow any future responsibility. I mean, I shouldn't word it like that, but there is a lot of freedom offered to the Buddhist. The actual dynamic nature of things asks us to see all nouns as verbs, all appearance of stability as just how things are at a moment in time that we cannot hold on to. Thinking, holy shit, this goes on forever. When are we gonna stop? Because it's been 2 hours. Okay. Okay, I think we've got a good stopping point in about 10 pages. Thinking of that apple, or that person, or that relationship, chronic pain, disease, or state of privilege as constantly undergoing change is not true in the ordinary sense, but it is true in the literal sense, and sometimes deserves more of our awareness. The actual world presents both more risk and more positive opportunity than we customarily see in it. Let us revisit our apple example again to put the range of next moment possibilities in high relief. A pre-apple grain of pollen contains 2 sperm cells. A moment from now, they might enter into more than all the apple conditions mentioned above and have descendants that run on for millennia doing likewise. Or They may not join with an apple ovum and just be dead a moment from now. I stumbled over that, so like to say it again. We have no way of telling the difference between a pollen seed between a sperm cell that will have descendants for millennia and a sperm cell that will die today. They're all the same as far as we can tell. Or to put it another way, it feels like the Buddhist is encouraged to journey beyond the simplified knowledge. Anything that is taught to a mass of people is inherently simplified and will come short. Yeah. Yeah. I do believe there's a grand truth. I don't believe we're all, like, living in a simulation. I don't believe in solipsism, which is the belief that you are the only mind that exists and you are just dreaming the entire world. I don't believe in that. And I also don't believe that it's possible for multiple people to have a shared hallucination in the absence of an actual reality. I believe that it is self-evident that if more than one person exists, if more than one perspective exists, then there must be an environment for them to exist in. So, by that logic, I think there is a grand truth. I just think that it is an ideal that we can pursue and approximate, but we'll never reach, and that's fine. Asking ourselves to would be masochistic. And not in a healthy BDSM-friendly way, either. If a grain of pollen had a mind, it's not hard to imagine that mind being focused on the overwhelming likelihood of being dead soon, to the exclusion of thoughts about thousands of years of billions of apple descendants to come. However, while demise is vastly more likely for a sperm, it is not the only thing that is possible. In fact, despite the overwhelming preponderance of apple gamete death, the fact that we have some apple trees today tells us that 100% of the time in the past, some apple gametes joined with mates. How many? Percentage-wise, almost none of the gametes produced by apple trees produce plants. Yet we have an abundance of apple trees. Almost none can be a synonym for enough, or even for abundantly enough. Almost never can be a synonym for it happens all the time. Rarely literally means it sometimes happens, not that it won't. This is why we eat the strawberries. We never actually know what may yet happen, and we are often profoundly surprised. I will provide the full meaning of eat the strawberries later in the parable of the monk and the tiger. This is not some Pollyanna reason for most gametes to be hopeful and cheery. I don't know what Pollyanna means. It is simply an illustration of how, even in the face of the obvious objective preponderance of chances for something to happen, sometimes something else happens. Reality always includes more things than the part we consciously note. The incompleteness of our knowledge necessitates our gap-filling illusions, but this limits our predictive abilities. Because it is literally not possible for us to comprehend the world as the ceaseless, massive set of interdependent processes that it actually is, we often fail to see how our current situation came to be, or the risks of undesired changes that may yet occur, or the opportunity for positive change to occur, or how grateful we could be for what is already so, or will be for what will yet come. Our thinking is often both shallow and rigid. Compared to reality, it is inescapably shallow, which should give us humility rather than certainty. Rigidity is completely escapable, completely optional, so we should get better at opting out of rigidity, which will give us hope. Here is a parable about how easily we can excessively bemoan a hardship, fail to foresee a positive next moment, or cling to something positive and fail to be prepared for the next upcoming negative. Told in various ways and given various names, this story is a Buddhist classic. Let's go with one of its popular names, the horse parable. Before we get to the horse parable, I want to point out that I strongly disagree with my dad in something that he said just now, and I will share my perspective as well. And of course, you can choose either one or make your own as you see fit. But he says that rigidity is completely escapable. I think that without meaning to, by saying that, he is implying that you can just make sure you're never sure of anything. And that's not helpful. What comes to mind for me, sorry, I bumped the mic. What comes to mind for me is that, okay, I promise I'm trying not to trauma dump. This is just a very accessible example for me right now. But as I have come to terms with the fact that I am high-functioning disabled, one of the most freeing conclusions I came to was that I am high-functioning disabled. By allowing myself to be rigid in that, I have opened myself up to focus more on how to contend with that, rather than constantly reevaluating whether it's even true, whether I'm being too easy on myself, whether I need to push harder. I don't think that it serves us to be fully flexible in all of our ideas all of the time. We do have to make investments with our beliefs. We just have to remember that they are investments, they are bets, and we can invest and bet wrong, and the only thing worse than doing that is refusing to acknowledge it. It would be pretty scary if humanity ever got to a point where they can simulate a real-time universe. That would be awful! Second guessing can be the death of the mind. It really can, especially if you have OCD. Did your dad mean absolute rigidity, or something like what you mean? With being rigid in an idea or a truth, but letting yourself branch out from that. Based on what he's said so far in this chapter, I do think that he meant... Like, he and I would agree on this totally. If he and I were to talk right now, we would absolutely end up on the same page. So, he was trying to say what I'm saying. I don't agree with his wording. I think that saying rigidity is completely optional ignores the fact that it's a balancing act, just like it is with certain, what was the other one? Shallowness. Well, actually, no, because it is inevitably going to be shallow, but we have to be conscious about how rigid we are with it. We do have a choice in how rigid it is. And I guess that's what he means. Like, it is completely optional, but opt to have some rigidity. Stand for something. And remember that the most important thing about standing for something is allowing that something to change. A farmer's stallion ran away. His neighbor came by to console him. "Such bad luck," said the neighbor. The farmer replied, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" The next day the stallion returned of its own accord, joined by 3 wild mares. "Such good luck," said the neighbor. The farmer replied, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" The following day the farmer's son tried to tame one of the mares. He was thrown off and broke his leg. "Such bad luck," said the neighbor. The farmer replied, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" The following day, the army was conscripting young men to fight, and likely die, in a war. As this young man's leg was broken, they left him at home with his family. Hearing of this, the neighbor awoke to what the farmer had been telling him. He thought to himself, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" We typically experience good and bad things as if they are much more static than they are. Unconsciously, we ignore how very much we do not know about each next moment, or even the present moment. We imagine things as permanent, or at least as more nearly permanent than they really are. I am fond of a 4-frame cartoon I came across. Lacking permission to place the image here, I'll narrate it. 1. A young girl asks to use her father's hand tools, and he gives permission. 2. Another adult tells the father that his daughter's work will not end well because she is so young. 3. He says it will not begin well, but who knows how it will end. 4. 20 years later, the adult daughter, wearing a tool belt, tells her now aging father that she just finished repairing the roof of his home for him. One situation in which we hold tightly to an illusion of permanence is when we despair. Despair is the feeling that something is impossible to live with, even though we are in fact continuing to exist, and that this problem will last forever and never change, even though nothing lasts forever, and if something bad endures for a long period of time, our response to it changes. Quote, in the 2003 New Yorker article, Jumpers, almost every person interviewed who had jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, but not died, said they regretted it as soon as they were in the air. One jumper stated, I instantly realized that everything in my life that I'd thought was unfixable was totally fixable, except for having just jumped. Benjamin Watson. Feel your feelings, but don't believe them. It is very important to feel our feelings as fully as possible, or we miss life's highlights at one end and fail to let our pain run its course and diminish at the other end. It is also important because we cannot be truly joyful for another person's happiness, or compassionate toward their dukkha if we have no point of reference within ourselves. The more we have at stake, positively or negatively, the more intense our feelings, the more likely they are telling us something that is not true. Maintain feeling and believing as two different things. I like that. I think that's a really important note. The more we have at stake, the more intense our feelings are, and the more we let ourselves get led astray. Because the more we have at stake, by definition, the more emotion we have about it. The more emotion we have about it, the more likely we are to accept a comforting lie. When our feelings are intense, if they are negative, not only do we believe them, but we tend to feel that they will go on forever, or at least for far longer than we can survive. It is true that negative events never unhappen, but our response to them does change over time, so forever unchanging bad feelings is not a real thing. Even if we continue to feel bad about something such as a tragic loss, we don't feel the same bad. We don't feel the same intensity. And we don't feel only bad to the exclusion of all other experiences. When our feelings are intense and good, we want them to be forever unchanged, but they are usually more transitory than bad feelings. The more intense our positive or negative feelings, the more we either become unable to focus on much of anything, or we overfocus on one or a few things. In either case, we end up blinded to things that would significantly change what might happen next, and even how to interpret what has already occurred. Whenever we think or feel in terms of forever or unchanging, we are very likely to be talking nonsense, and very likely to make mistakes. At the risk of trauma dumping, at one point I didn't want to feel my feelings at all, but now I get the need for doing so, both good and bad. Yeah, I've had experiences like that as well. I've certainly... I remember like a certain week in my life where I just wanted to sleep for days, even though that wasn't a physical possibility, let alone a practical option, because I just wanted to get to the other side of the pain. But I'm glad to say that even then, even though I was relatively young, like an adult, but relatively young within that context, at no point was I like, I need to get rid of my feelings because they hurt me more than help me. I was just like, I'd like to hibernate, please. I'd like to go into stasis until this is over. And while that wasn't an option, the suffering did end. Letting pain run its course and naturally diminish over time instead of suppressing it has helped me greatly. I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah, something that my dad has... I mean, what he says right here, feel your feelings but don't believe them. That's come up like in his parenting of me and my sister. He has always He has always said that it's important to feel things as you are feeling them, but also recognize that if some or all of those feelings are based on things that probably aren't true or aren't fully true, you can still feel that. The chemicals in your brain are not going to magically switch off. But you need to understand at a deeper level that at some point you're going to have to come to terms with the fact that your point of view on this is just wrong, and it needs to change, or you will continue to feel terrible, or you will begin to feel terrible if you're stuck in like a manic episode. Transience of emotions is annoying when making music. It's also annoying when making video essays. I would say that this has been remarkably absent of trauma dumping considering the topics, as in topics have been brought up without dumping. I agree, yeah. We're all acknowledging that pain exists, but none of us are being like, and then the next day, the dog said, I love my grandmom, but she's the kind of Southern that will tell you everything that happened. Like, you know how, like, here we were talking about how when you say, I woke up, that is much better than saying, my alarm began to produce, like, the alarm I programmed in my phone began to produce vibrations in the speaker, which my eardrum detected and turned into, like, in the same way, my grandmom can't just say, like, yeah, I had trouble with my taxes today. She'll be like, so then the CPA told me I needed to start another Form 1040. And I said, and I'm like, Grandmom, I don't fucking care. I'm sorry you had trouble with your taxes, but why are you making me have trouble with you having trouble with your taxes? Feel your feelings, but don't believe them is probably my favorite quote from this book so far. I'll tell my dad you said so. I'll talk to him later today. That dog has some fucking attitude. Knowing that the information we have is always incomplete and imperfect renders it an inescapable fact that humility and level-headedness, equanimity, are a good policy. It's just foolish to think our information is complete and accurate, our reasoning is ever flawless, and our emotions never distract or mislead us. Just the opposite is true. We are always playing probabilities based on faulty premises, and never know what our margin of error is. Make your best judgment calls and take corresponding actions. Don't imagine or let anyone tell you it's inexcusable if your judgment is off the mark. It's normal and even inevitable. As you learn more, make adjustments, and don't condemn your best efforts to date, or anyone else's. It just occurred to me that we all know that the only way not to make mistakes, the only way not to fail, is to not try. We all know that. But we really, really like to forget that that applies to beliefs. And I think that's because the illusion that we are so wired in to objective reality is a very strong illusion. It has to be. It's our survival instincts. But choosing our beliefs is a skill. Critical thinking is a skill, and it requires practice and it requires error. You will believe things that aren't true. I will. I do! I just don't know which beliefs those are yet. Hopefully one day I'll figure them out, but I won't ever figure out all of them. And none of us will. It's a skill. Work at it. Growth means making yourself uncomfortable. I hate that you're right, but you are. Hi, Aaliyah! Critical thinking, did you roll a nat 20? Roll for think? That's why critical thinking is so rare these days. It's because there's only a 5% chance of having a good thought. No one thinks it is embarrassing to value learning. To learn implies that you are in some ways uninformed, misinformed, or incorrect. Why be embarrassed about a logical implication of something everyone values? You know, that's a better way of wording what I just said. It is a requirement that if we are to get smarter, we are at some point less smart. Ah! Passing by to eat some strawberries. Only got a few pages left for today's read. Proceed with buckets full of humility and readiness to adapt in light of what you learn next. You don't have to be constantly correct. Expect you will be wrong sometimes, and learn from what happens. Have this equally in mind when feeling judgmental about others. I'm starting to think there aren't really any strawberries. It's what you get from the story. Because we often think we have clear and complete knowledge of all the factors impinging on a decision, when in fact we do not, we can make the most careful analysis possible, choose an action with the best intentions and good judgment, act with the deepest conviction and solid expertise, and still be surprised by the outcome. We can only do the best we can, and we should do the best we can, but we hardly ever have knowledge as complete as we believe it to be. Even when something is very, very likely to be correct, it can be wrong. Even when something is very, very rare, rare literally means that it sometimes happens. I came up with this idea on my own, but every time I brought it up to somebody, they were like, that's literally an episode of Gravity Falls, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm not special then. But I started thinking about how as the number of faces on a die increase, the chance of each face being rolled decreases. That's obvious, right? For every face of a die, no matter how big or small the number of faces is, each face is probably not going to be rolled the next time you roll that die. And yet, one of them must. Which means that if you have an infinite number of faces on your die, then when you roll it, something impossible will happen. That's cool! Anyway. We don't know as much as we think we know. We don't process what we know as logically and completely as we think we do. Take your best guesses so that you can get on with life and most often do well, but know that you are guessing, and that certainty always contains an element of, or a lot of, illusion. It shouldn't be a death sentence when you are wrong or when someone else is wrong. Treat them as you would like to be treated when you are mistaken. Mistakes are a natural, common, and inescapable part of life. Mistakes would be vastly less consequential if we stopped being surprised and outraged when something so ordinary and predictable occurs. We should be in readiness to adjust and go again graciously, instead of being primed to assign blame. It's cool! Quote, when you plant lettuce, if it does not grow well, you don't blame the lettuce. You look for reasons it is not doing well. It may need fertilizer, more water, or less sun. You never blame the lettuce. Thich Nhat Hanh. That's interesting that he says that because back when the economy was first starting to get really bad in the US, you know, in this most recent of many times that it's gotten really bad in the US, and I don't mean GDP, because that has generally been pretty decent. I mean in terms of like what the economy's like for the average person, or the median person. I I remember thinking it was so absurd that executives were saying, like, millennials aren't really working. They're not going to restaurants either. They're not going. They're not buying houses. They're not even really going grocery shopping as much. They hate the economy, and it's like, bro, fucking pay us. What? You think we like having a lower standard of living? You think an entire generation just said, yeah, comfort ain't for me no more. Jesus. How much more success would we create if we cut every endeavor into smaller, lower-cost pieces? We could then learn from smaller, less expensive mistakes and disappointments, respond to them with equanimity, and move on. We could celebrate our intermediate successes fully, spurring ourselves on to accomplish more, and enjoy our challenges instead of being overwhelmed by them. It is legitimate to sometimes feel disappointment, irritation, and anger, but it is not as if the cosmos itself has suddenly broken its contract with us. There is no contract. It is legitimate to sometimes feel pride, satisfaction, good luck, or a well-earned sense of accomplishment, but it is not as if the universe has proclaimed that we have some sort of exceptional worthiness. And I'll point out, it's also not that the universe has fulfilled its end of the bargain. Fingers crossed you will be able to one day. Yes, indeed. For me as well, I hope. It's like they want to throw an entire generation under the bus to become peasants. They do. They absolutely do. As many generations as possible before they die, actually. They love peasants. Unless they can see the peasants, then they hate peasants. Since a significant number of my generation are in their 20s and it's now extremely hard to move out anywhere, yeah, it's hard to move, it's hard to get employed, it's hard to get up in the morning. It's so absurd to me that, like, similarly to saying, like, millennials aren't buying anything, the same executives are being like, Gen Z doesn't like to work. And it's like, well, have you tried giving them a reason to care? I know the answer. No. No, you haven't. Not once. Even if your ideas are better founded, better thought out, and more frequently correct than anyone else's, it doesn't mean you have an exclusive and complete lock on the truth in this particular moment. So often there are factors we simply do not know to consider. Don't assume your own correctness. Don't just allow for the remote possibility that someone else might have a worthwhile thought. Invite additional information as if it is fragile, or else it would have already presented itself boldly. Wait, invite additional information as if it is fragile, or else it would have already presented itself boldly. I'm not sure I fully get that sentence, but that's okay. Have you tried Folgers in your cup? Back in my day, people worked hard and got anything they wanted. I know, Grandmom! My grandmom actually said that to me one time, and I was like, yeah, I know. I know. And I would love to have been back in your day. Well, I mean, in some ways not. But Grandmom, guess what? It ain't your day. I remember it. Overall, I'm very fortunate in that my entire family is, for the most part, not very problematic. But, you know, we're humans. There's stuff. There's individuals. And although my grandmom is relatively modern and not often racist, there was one time where she was talking about, like, this doesn't feel like my city anymore. And, like, I heard the sadness in her voice. She was talking about, like, racial minorities at the time, which was great. Thanks, Grandmom. But the point is, there was real sadness in her voice, and I was like, this is the attachment thing. This is the illusory attachment thing. It was never your city. Cities don't belong to people. You can enjoy your lifestyle and your community, but you will never own it, and you will never have a right to it. It will change. Especially if you're an old person, you've got to expect that it's going to change. And you can be sad about that, but you cannot pretend that it is unethical for it to no longer be your city. It is unethical to consider it your city, ever. Not often racist, I love how you put that. Oh no, look! Another insert skin color did a bad thing to insert different skin color. Doesn't that make you feel like there's a racial problem? Look at that! Not how poor you are and what you will be. There's a racial war, not a class war, right? Yeah, it's a menace. Americans, when a country built on immigration has immigration for real! Literally every person in the US and in Australia who is not in the minority that is the indigenous people there, you're an immigrant. You might be 4th or 5th generation, but you know how many generations people in Europe have of their families being there? More than 5. A little more than 5. It's typically more than 5. Not that immigration is a problem anywhere, but it's certainly not a problem in countries made of immigrants. Also, like, last thing I'll say about this. European immigrants that came to the US objectively have far more blood on their hands than any other US immigrants ever. Mic drop. I'm done. I have an Australian friend and her family complains about immigration. You guys were banished there as a prison colony. And now you want to gatekeep it? Kind of disagree with that. What if she's sad about the change because the change itself challenges your core beliefs and sometimes change is not good? That's completely valid. That was not the context of the statement. She was talking about not feeling that her surroundings were familiar anymore. And while that is not necessarily racial, that is also just the changing times, technology, changing values, changing generations, different economic pressures, having different people build different things and work different jobs. Like, there is a lot of change. I get what she means. She has the right to be nostalgic. But if she hadn't... I just feel like she's suffering unnecessarily by acting like she lost something that belonged to her, rather than just moving on to a chapter that isn't as engaging for her. And she might even find this chapter more engaging if she stopped trying to compare it to what it will never be again, and was never going to stay. And then recently someone of obvious skin color offed someone else of the same skin color. Now everyone's losing their minds and censoring comedians and saying that they were a political affiliation and gender identity that they were not because it's convenient for their narrative. Change is always on the horizon. Except change. Wait, no, I mean... Yeah, change in everything is on the horizon, except for change in change, which is not changing. She's being possessive about a state of existence that belongs to her memories, to her past, but not to her. Yeah! Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Aaliyah, there's something you should know about me. I'm an idiot. And I just say shit sometimes. What was this blood yapping about? That was terrible, I'm sorry. Almost. Where was I? Don't challenge people to challenge your thinking. Invite them to think out loud with you. Invite yourself to think out loud with them. In other words, don't be the change my mind guy. It's not only about the conclusion reached, it's also about everyone playing a satisfying role in reaching the conclusion. Ooh, I find that very thought-provoking. Because too often, I let myself think that the goal of argument is for everyone to agree at the end. And for everyone to be closer to, hopefully, the truth. In my mind, that is the goal of an argument. But my dad points out here that there is also social benefit to arguing properly. And that is that, like critical thinking, respectful, constructive argument is a skill, and it's a difficult skill. And the more we practice it, the more we expose other people to healthy argument. So it's twofold. One, hopefully you're getting closer to the truth as a group. And two, you're normalizing disagreement that results in progress. Now, I'm not saying, and my dad's not saying, that that means we owe everybody our time and our arguments. There are many people online who have made it very clear that there is no value in speaking to them at all. And I imagine we will see many more of them in the future. But when somebody is willing to approach you on even ground, even if it's a little scary, even if it's a little uncomfortable, even if it's a little painful, you should take them up. You should take them up. Funny how political spectrums work across borders. In Norway, the entirety of the US two-party system is viewed as from somewhere near the middle of the right to all the way into the far right. So when US politicians accuse others of being socialists, we just laugh. Yeah. It's not just in Norway. Actually, it's well known in the US that the entire developed world considers the United States to not have a leftist party. And I agree with that. I think that there are many leftists in the United States, but they are not running for president. I would consider like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her squad, as it were. I think that they're all leftists. I think Bernie Sanders is a leftist. I think Elizabeth Warren is a leftist. I think that there are many people in local governments who are leftists, some governors. But the Democratic Party itself is very interested in maintaining the status quo, which is by definition conservative. And what makes our quote-unquote conservative party more conservative in that is that they actually want to return to the past. And I don't mean to say that as a criticism necessarily, but I do want to firmly state that it is my belief that in the United States, conservatives want to go to a less civilized time. And I think it's important to state that as the fact that I believe that it is, because that informs our future decisions. More of a debate, then, without letting things turn into a debacle. Yeah! I mean, yeah. Do a median of the ages of the politicians in the US, what do you see? I don't know. Let me see if that information is readily available. I'll just look at the federal government. I'll look at Congress. Okay, let's do that. Let's look at median age of United States Congress. Congress is getting younger, says PewResearch.org. We've got... here we go. Regardless of political affiliation, the median freshman in Congress is 50 to 52, and the median incumbent is 59. Great! Fucking incredible! Great! Wonderful! They want what they perceive as their golden age, but it would only benefit certain groups. Yeah, and I'm always at war with myself about how political I can get on stream because I have really strong beliefs and I don't feel that they're hateful, but I know that they would upset certain people, and so I try to strike a balance, but so much for getting younger? No, that's the scary thing. It is. I think that the data strongly suggests that US conservatives are harmed by US conservative policy. I think the data strongly suggests that in the context of the United States, voting for what is considered to be right here actively harms most of the people it affects. And voting left actively helps most of the people it affects. And I think that that is fact shown over the years. And I could be wrong about that. I haven't done extensive research on this. I don't actually like politics. I just feel that it's my duty to be somewhat informed about them. So I could be wrong about that, but I believe that it is fact, not opinion, that United States conservative policy does more harm than good. Anyway. Because of the international role that the US has in the world scene, there are a lot of people here that have silently rooted for Bernie Sanders for a great number of years. Yeah, to grand disappointment. Here too. And I mean, surely Bernie is probably also a flawed human. Almost certainly. Wait, no. I take that back. Certainly. But compared to the rest of what we can see from over here, it's weird to watch from a distance. That makes sense. Mind you, I am fully aware that the picture we get of the US politics over here is biased in a number of ways. It is biased in a number of ways, but it's also probably closer to the truth than you think. Only share what you feel comfortable sharing for the online environment you want. No, that's the trouble, see, is I'm trying to do that, and I'm not sure if I'm succeeding. I never know until people respond. Eggs don't seem to be getting any cheaper currently. Oh, eggs. Alright, let's finish up. I've been streaming for longer than I planned to, but that's okay. Humility is not the opposite of confidence. In fact, it shows that you have a lot of confidence that your worth does not depend on something as mythical as infallibility. This will also make you less of a jerk, you know, if that is a problem. If it does say that. Oh, you gotta go? Thanks for coming, Pedro! You have to miss the end. Unforgivable! There'll be a VOD if you really want to see the end. Enjoy your day, your life. If instead of being humble, you are dedicated to the illusion that you have complete and certain information, you are simply behaving badly. It shouldn't be that hard to invite others to share their thoughts and feelings, and to truly listen to them with the intent to learn something about them and about yourself, as well as whatever topic you are currently discussing. We necessarily live in a fantasy world, stripped of most of its actual content, and riddled with fill-in-the-gap illusions, because it's the only way our limited minds can function in the midst of reality's actual complexity. So what you're telling me, Dad, is that AAA developers are just holding up a mirror to life. Sorry. Just couldn't help but take that stab. No, I won't have a good time? Okay. You mentioned the context of data about who's hurt by voting in some which way. I remember seeing this investigation that illustrated that the US economy always slows down after the GOP having been in office and rehabilitates every time the Democrats are in office. Yes, that is true. Which is then again negated when the Republicans come into office, swinging economic growth down again. Yeah, part of the problem there is that people underestimate how long it takes for policy to affect standard of living and economy, with the exception of, extreme decisions like Trump's tariffs. And so a lot of the times, presidents will get blamed for their predecessors' mistakes, and no one really notices. But yeah, it's really unfortunate because the people that need help most from the government often vote against the government helping people. And I could get into the psychology of that, but I won't. But I think it's just... I've said this before on one of the Eat the Strawberry streams. I'll say it again. There are only 3 things that a government can be. One is anarchist, where it doesn't really exist at all, or doesn't exist at all. One is socialist, where it takes taxes and spends it on the public. One is fascist, where it takes taxes and doesn't spend them on the public. You can be some combination of the 3, but those are the only 3 things there are. So if you say all socialism is bad, you are inherently saying that you want anarchy or fascism. Don't say that. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Oh, no. The way I phrased myself was taking into account the delay. Yeah. I wasn't contradicting anything you were saying. Just agreeing that, yeah, that is kind of how it works, and people miss that. This trichotomy might be correct, but I have a somewhat different perspective. Capitalism and socialism, they are tools to be used at different times. I do think that there are some merits to capitalism. I do know some communists. I'm not personally communist. But I do think that socialism and capitalism are not mutually exclusive. To me, socialism literally just means spending tax dollars on ordinary citizens, which inherently means what people on the right often like to refer to as government handouts that are like ethically condemnable, but it's our money. That's what taxes are. That's what government funds are. It's our money. The Marshall Plan and its consequences was a disaster for the Italian race. I don't know what that is, actually. We as Italians are unfortunately binded to US politics since it influences our stock market and economy heavily. Unfortunately, the whole world is like that. Unfortunately, it goes like this. Republican goes in power, stock market good, bad economy. Republican goes in power, stock market bad, good economy. We can't... Wait. What? Did you mean to say Democrat one of those times? Or is it just that fickle? Yeah. I really think that the time of comparing stock market health to economy health is long past. Oh, Democrat for the second example, got it. Yeah. That's the... Holy crap, that's such a different effect. The Marshall Aid was extremely appreciated by Norwegian recent history. Wow! Yikes. I think the EU has a lot of benefits, but there are always problems when you try to... I mean, the more people you have under the same laws, the more those laws will hurt people. That's just objectively true. That's why I think almost all countries are much, much, much larger than they should be. But, you know, conquerors love conquering, so here we are. But in my mind, a single person can't even know what their own future is going to best be served by. You certainly can't accurately predict everything that's going to be helpful for, like, your spouse without asking them. So, if you can't do that for one person, how are you gonna write laws for hundreds of millions of people and expect that to go well? Laws will hurt people. Every single law will prevent justice somewhere at some point. Best we can do is best we can do. And that's why I'm really against the whole idea of, no, we can't put this law, we can't sign this bill into law because it would make my friend make less money. Okay, I'm genuinely sorry to hear that. I'm genuinely sorry for your friend. But you know what? I'm gonna say too bad. The cost of not putting it into law would be greater. Obviously, this isn't a scenario where I want the law to come into play. I'm not saying that every new law is great. That would be stupid. Just like refusing to pass a law because it will hurt one person, that is also stupid. We necessarily live in a fantasy world stripped of most of its actual content and riddled with fill-in-the-gap illusions because it's the only way our limited minds can function in the midst of reality's actual complexity. Recognizing this should lead to great increases in both humility and creativity when we stop seeing things as if our perception of them is complete. Quote, "A mark of an open mind is being more committed to your curiosity than to your convictions. The goal of learning is not to shield old views against new facts. It's to revise old views to incorporate new facts. Ideas are possibilities to explore, not certainties to defend." Adam Grant. Quote, "Humility is the foundation of all virtues, for it allows us to approach every situation with an open mind and a willingness to learn from others." Marcus Aurelius. Quote, "The path to wisdom is paved with humility, openness to new ideas, and a willingness to challenge one's own beliefs." Socrates. I think sometimes legislation is somewhat vague because the legislators rely on other parts of the system like judges and bureaucracy to pick up where the laws fall short. Yeah, that's the thing about laws is, in some ways I feel like... No, never mind. I was going to say in some ways I feel like we'd be better off if laws were written in, like, a program. God fucking damn, my hair's just... I want a haircut so bad. I feel like if law enforcement was done by computers, that would obviously be a bad thing. But the silver lining would be that computers only do what they're told, which means that if a law has a hole in it, the computer will not be able to enforce the law properly. There won't be, like... There won't be court cases where the judge has to be like, I don't know what the fuck they meant when they wrote this. There's no wiggle room. I mean, there would still be loopholes by definition. I mean, every bug is technically a loophole in code execution. So there would still be that, but there would be no ambiguity is what I'm saying. Your hair has personality, work with it, ask it what it wants. It wants to be free. But I want to see. We have, conflicting interests. I will not be governed by a clanker, hard R. I love the memes I'm seeing about that. Sure, you gave money to rebuild Italy, great. Now we have an unstable economy, stupid stock market, and 3 major US-only, no NATO, US-only military bases, and 80-plus targets to destroy by an enemy nation that will cripple the US in our territory. Yuppie! Oh, cool! So we just put we put 80-plus targets on your backs. And you don't even have nations other than the US to put interest into that, and the US hates giving foreign aid. Except to billionaires. Your hair is beautiful. I wish I had hair like that. Thank you. I do like my hair a lot. I just wish it was a few inches shorter. I just wish it was a few inches shorter. We do not talk about the NATO bases. Buddha's point in telling the parable of the blind men and the elephant to a group of monks was to admonish quarreling. We typically feel that we have certain knowledge from direct personal experience, like the blind men who each examine only a part of the elephant. We typically are not mindful that the data we have is so incomplete so much of the time that our conclusions can be fundamentally wrong. This being the case, Buddha's point was that quarreling is idiocy. The blind men would have obtained much more accurate knowledge by combining what was learned from each of their perspectives into an integrated whole, instead of each one asserting whatever they individually observed as the whole truth. Note that there was nothing hostile or competitive going on between them either. Their blunder was entirely the product of our normal habit of thinking that our limited, biased personal perspective is objective and complete. At best, this is naive and dopey. At worst, this is one way to be a jerk or a combatant. In low-stakes situations, just take your best guess and get on with it. If it turns out you were wrong, say something like, "Oh, I thought X, but it's Y," and get back to getting on with it. In high-stakes situations, be more careful about your assumptions, more gentle and eager in your collaborative communication with others, and be mindful that you are working on less than rigorous probabilities, not actual certainties. If it turns out you were wrong, say something like, "Oh, I am sorry I misunderstood," and get back to getting on with it. And that is where we will stop for today. Those billionaires really need help, surely. Yes. Much more than US citizens. Much more than US citizens. I can't even say it with a straight face. Some of the handouts that individual billionaires have gotten from the US government is more money than I've ever seen in my life. But that's ethical, and welfare is stealing from American citizens for lazy people. Got it. What was I gonna say on that note? Oh yeah, just in terms of like the trinity I was talking about between like fascism, socialism, and anarchy. It's really funny to me that on the right, it's common for people to say that taxation is theft. And I'm like, you're voting for it to be theft. Every chance we have an option to bring the taxes back to the people, you say no! Violently! I'm confused! And sad and angry! But that's just part of being in the US in 2025. And anywhere, but especially in the US. On that note... So we will go back to Silksong a week from today. We're continuing Fate Zero in Discord, and taxation is theft, so let's make sure the rich keep all the money. Yeah, because then it's not theft because it's not changing hands, and therefore, since theft implies money changing hands, or valuables changing hands, that means that giving everything to the rich is inherently theft prevention. Right? Missed last week, I was packing stuff. Oh no! It's okay. I do need to put up the VOD, but I'll do that right now. And I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you for being here. It really means a lot to me that you guys are so engaged in what my dad has to say and what I have to say. I'm so happy that I've been able to continue these Eat the Strawberries streams without feeling like I'm boring anybody or alienating anybody, and I just appreciate everyone's openness and everyone's thoughts. Little counterpoint, was there ever a time where a US president lowered taxes for the poor and increased for the rich? I don't think so. And to your point, Aaliyah, yes, I agree that that is a big problem in the United States and probably in many countries. Yeah, I'm not claiming that US tax law is fair. It's not. It's not. US tax law is not fair. But pretending that the concept of taxes are the problem is dumb. Yeah, the taxes need to come from the rich far more than they do. But taxes should happen. Period. I'm not boring! Yay! I think Teddy Roosevelt might be described as such, not for lightening taxes on the poor, but at least breaking up economic hegemony. I feel like... Did FDR raise taxes on the rich? I feel like by definition in the Great Depression, the rich were taxed more because the poor were unemployed. Anyway. I love you guys. I will talk to you soon. FDR was before World War II. Okay, I gotta go. Bye-bye! Wait, was he also in... Did he make it into...